Hello everyone, welcome to Analog IAS Current Affair Analysis for 1st June 2021. These are the articles for the day. This article titled Access Denied is regarding the lack of access to scientific literature and the uh, allegation of content piracy on certain public platforms like LibGen. So let us, in this context, discuss the broader aspect under which this news item will appear. For that, let us understand the science, technology, and innovation policy in our country. So, last year in June, the Office of Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India, that is PSA, and the Department of Science and Technology together came up with a new science, technology, and innovation policy. This is called STIP 2020. So, in this policy, there are certain highlights. Let us go through them. This is the fifth such policy. So, if we have to go back into the history, the first policy came out in 1958 itself. It was called the Scientific Policy Resolution and the first one in the domain of science in our country. So, it laid the foundation for any kind of scientific enterprise and scientific temper in our country. So, the major focus was on mainstreaming scientific education. After that, in 1983, we have had a technology policy statement which focused on just what we are talking about right now, that is self reliance. But today's idea of Atmanirbharta is different from this idea of self reliance. This idea of self reliance was a sort of a protectionist measure against any foreign intervention and maintaining the sovereignty. Today's Atmanirbharta is about how we have to gain access to all kinds of information and equip ourselves to become self sustainable. So, that is a basic philosophical difference between the focus on indigenous technology back then and the kind of focus that we have right now. After that, in 2003, there was another science, technology, and innovation policy which was hailed as the landmark shift because we aimed at increasing the research and development allocation of the budget to nearly 2% of GDP. And in 2013, we came up with the latest policy where it was acknowledged that in order to stay globally competitive, it was necessary for us to move towards a knowledge based economy. So, these are the highlights of previous policies. So, this present policy will try to integrate the lessons of pandemic, including the building of an Atmanirbhar Bharat by leveraging our strengths. So, this is the focus of our new policy. Let us reiterate. In 1958, the first aim was to develop scientific temper. In 1983, we were talking about self reliance. That is, whatever knowledge that is present within our country should reach out to the masses and it should turn into an economic activity. That is the focus of self reliance back then. In 2003, the major highlight was to increase the budget of R&D, and in 2013, we have decided that knowledge based economy is the future and we have to move towards it. So, amalgamating all these principles and moving a step higher through the lessons that we have learned in the pandemic, STIP says that we have to move towards Atmanirbharta, that is, learn from all the different dimensions and ensure that learning actually translates into capacity building at local level and then transform into a economic hub which will become the center for economic activity across the world. So India aspires to be self reliant in the sense that it becomes a major center in the global value chain. That is the aspiration behind this principle. So that is exactly the difference between self reliance back then and Atmanirbharta right now. So in this policy, there were four tracks which were identified, and in first track, it involves an extensive public and expert consultation process through which the dedicated platform for any discussion on science policies will be taken up. So this is about the initial discussions and deliberations. So this will ensure participation from wider scientific community as well. And in the second track, it is experts driven. Majority of the opinions are taken from the scientific community and then experts incorporate those principles and draft a policy. After this, in the third track, it involves extensive intra-state and intra-departmental consultation across the ministries and states. So this will also give accountability to the stakeholders and a voice to all the relevant stakeholders, because policies cannot be made in silos. Otherwise, what will happen is, if the scientists and policymakers end up making statements that are not practically translatable in governance, then the entire policy work becomes waste. So this is the third stage of the policy. And in the fourth track, it constitutes a apex level multi-stakeholder consultation. So it will move just beyond the stakeholders in the government and will move to the NGOs or private companies and every other stakeholders who will be impacted by this policies. So that is the framework of this entire policy. Now, one important aspect that this policy forget to address comprehensively is, how are we going to access the scientific technology and research on scientific technology or latest developments across the world, so that the principle that is laid down even in the 1958 resolution, that is to develop scientific temper, this emphasis on scientific temper is a part of our fundamental duties as well. Now, in ensuring that these duties are actually carried out by the people, the government also should empower people to have access to these. In a lot of public institutions, the budgets are allocated to have access to certain journals which will give insights into the latest developments in research and development in a particular technology. But if you're talking about the mid-level institutions and colleges, these expensive scientific journals access is very difficult. Now we cannot deny, in the age of information and democracy, access to this. In this context, there was a legal action taken by the scientific journals against two public platforms which gives access to these scientific journals, that is Sci-Hub and LibGen, is a point that we have to consider in the present context. Now, whenever we think about intellectual property rights or access to public information, the entire idea is shaped by Western ideals. In this age where India considers it to be a democratic right to have access to information and internet. Okay, so even in certain cases like Fahima Shireen was a state of Kerala case, uh, right to access internet was considered to be a part of right to life. So in this context, it is a very important question to balance between the rights of content creators, and at the same time it is important to balance the rights of people to have access to such kind of an information. Now this is a very peculiar dilemma. Should we not incentivize people who indulge in research and allow them to have certain royalty? Is it not right that we also at the same time ensure that people get access to this scientific literature so that they can build something better? Otherwise, without access to this literature, there is no way that people can build on the collective efforts of our scientific community. So how do we balance this? This is not exactly answered by our policy. Even in this context also, there is another point that we have to understand. One is the access, and the second is the quality of work that is generated in our country. What are the parameters considered when we are talking about the kind of scientific literature that is generated in our country? A lot of higher educational institutions in our country measure the quality of our work by the citations in international journals. That is the reason why international journals are so glorified. But one thing that we have to understand here is, the standards set in the Western journals do not actually translate into plausible outcomes that are relevant for our Indian society. Say, for example, if the priority of a country or a small scientific community is to serve to the industry in US, if
a particular activity is taken up in India based on the parameters set by that journal, this is because it is the legacy of the British imperialistic era. Just because scientific activity was very rampant in the European Union or Europe back then, the standards set by our Indian institutions were in tandem with the activities being taken up in Europe. But times have changed right now. India is trying to become Atmanirbhar or self reliant. So it is high time that not only we have access to the content that is being generated from the West. For this, the government must create a pool where this common scientific literature is available at mass to the public in our country. At the same time, we also have to change our parameters of what is called as a proper research work. Mere citation in international journals has become just a namesake research, and in fact, these journals have built around a small economic model based on this fact. There were citations in various newspapers as well that these journals even produce bogus research papers just to generate certain economic revenue. Another important aspect that we have to discuss here is the concept of peer review. When you are talking about peer review, there is always an element of subjectivity. So, what exactly is peer review? Say a professor in a college has published a paper or want to publish a paper. In order to get that paper published, he has to reach out to a scientific community, a network of scholars who already have certain expertise in that area, and get acceptance from them. So, in order to grow in their careers, teachers and professors are continuously engaged in getting these journals published through peer review. What happens in the process is they miss out on some meaningful teaching and engagement with the student, which could have actually enhanced their line of thinking and also the ability to nurture a community that is aspiring to become the next generation scientists. So this is not how we achieve Atmanirbharta. We have to focus on concrete results that are relevant for our society. It is in this context, this UGC guidelines with respect to peer review should also be reconsidered and redesigned so that they meet the aspirations of the society. This is the reason why in 2003, when we are talking about reaching the R&D budget of 2% of GDP, that did not actually translate into vision because the people in power did not feel that it was worthwhile chasing this without actually correcting the anomalies. So this is high time that we correct these anomalies, because if a lot of revenue is just spent on this peer review or namesake research and development without actually having any implication on the society, then that kind of research will not actually help the entire nation in its nation building. Also, there would be a danger of brain drain. So it is high time that we collaborate with the private sector, align the priorities of the private sector with that of the government, because private will always look at the future as a sort of an investment, and the government will always look at the society as a responsibility. Now, somewhere between the aspirations of the government and the aspirations of the private sector, we can use this R&D in certain sectors. Say, for example, telecom, we can talk about health. The latest vaccine development in the healthcare sector with respect to COVID is a prime example as to how we can leverage the strengths of private sector. So for this to happen, a formidable research and development budget is necessary, and for that to happen, we have to reorient our priorities.
This article is titled Indian Arbitration on a Slow Road to Death. Now let us understand what arbitration actually means. Whenever there is conflict between two parties, the recourse that they take is judiciary. So when they can't settle the case in a court, they have to look for an alternative mechanism. But why can't they settle? The first reason is pendency of cases. Now, in such a context, there is a gaining importance given to the overstressed judicial system with huge pendency of cases. With a lot of commercial disputes, it's definitely needed to have a proper arbitration mechanism or a settlement mechanism in place for faster resolution of issues. So the importance of arbitration and the present status in India is discussed in this article. Arbitration generally means using a third party where these two parties which are in conflict select this third party as a neutral judge, and this third party will settle the dispute as per the norms laid down. So this is the simplest explanation of the concept of arbitration. In India, broadly, there are two kinds of arbitration. One is the ad hoc arbitration, the other one is the institutional arbitration. Ad hoc arbitration means the parties agree that they would visit to a tribunal. That tribunal will be conducting the arbitration procedure in accordance with the rules which have been laid down or agreed by the parties beforehand itself. And if the parties did not have any agreement as such, in that case, the tribunal will already be having certain rules laid down in place, which is as per the Arbitration and Conciliation Act. And again, this act itself is based on the principles laid down in UN-CITRAL law or the United Nations Commission on International Trade Law. So this is the mechanism. But the problem here is the procedures followed in these tribunals itself is a big problem for a lot of investors, especially the big investors, as you can see in the Keynes case. After that, the government has been amending the act continuously, which is even furthering the delay. So the very purpose with which this act was enacted is getting defeated because of these amendments. The focus is more on procedures rather than the end objective, according to the writer. So the second aspect is the institutional arbitration. Institutional arbitration means they are just like offices which are specifically meant for these purposes, and these sometimes include PSUs also. In India, the irony is that if you take a look at the national litigation policy, which is in the draft stage itself, this national litigation policy says that we have to reduce the litigation of government agencies itself, that is PSUs itself. Now PSUs are under a lot of stress in this economic situation because they want to retain their autonomy and the government wants to privatize them. So disinvestment trends are increasing. Because of this fact, there is a lot of tussle between the institutional arbitration and the PSUs involved. So this is leading to nowhere. And Supreme Court in latest cases sometimes even restricted foreign lawyers to give advice also. This is making the situation all the more complicated because in India we don't have professionals who specifically deal with these arbitration mechanisms at an affordable cost. There are a few good lawyers, but they are very expensive and out of reach for a lot of parties in dispute. So the cost of litigation itself is increasing, which is again identified in the National Litigation Policy. All these problems were identified in S.N. Sri Krishna Committee, which was constituted to address this issues laid down in the policy. But the latest amendments, if you take a look at them, the focus is again on the procedure rather than the end objective. So the author, who is actually a member of this arbitration industry, warns that if the government does not react on time now, it will lead to a slow death of arbitration industry in our country. That is the gist of this article.